everyone, welcome to Gastronomy Games. Today, we are going to be going over some basic knife skills using fresh pico de gallo as a template. Being competent with a knife will make almost every kitchen project that much easier, so without any further ado, let's get to the kitchen. So before we cut anything, let's talk about our setup, starting with knives. This is an 8-inch French-style stainless steel chef knife with a forged German-style blade. The slight curve in the blade is indicative of French-style knives and makes it versatile in its ability to slice, chop, and rock and cut, which we will demonstrate later in this video. Because of the versatile shape, this is my recommendation for beginners. Blades can either be forged or stamped, and while they are more expensive, forged knives will hold a better edge, are more resistant to damage, and are often more balanced than stamped knives. Finally, the two main styles of blades are German or Western and Japanese style. Japanese blades are generally sharpened to a smaller angle than their German counterparts, meaning they can cut with more precision. They are also made with harder steel, meaning they can hold their edge better, but their blades are more prone to chip and are harder to sharpen. Because of this, if you are an inexperienced cook, I'd recommend a German blade because of this easier upkeep. Chef knives have three main parts: the handle, the blade, and the bolster, which is the very end of the blade right before the handle begins. Knives can come with open or closed, also known as capped, bolsters. I prefer open bolstered knives because they sharpen more uniformly, and I prefer the way they feel in my hand. For beginner cooks, a good chef knife can handle 85% of the cutting jobs, while a paring knife can handle the rest. This is a 3.5-inch paring knife, once again with an open bolster, German-style forged blade. The rest of our cutting setup consists of a rich light cutting board that is dishwasher safe, equipped with 4 rubber feet to keep it from sliding as we cut. You can also place a damp towel under the board if yours does not have feet, a clean towel to wipe off our board, a bowl for scrap, and a bowl to put partially cut vegetables. We also have a honing steel to realign our blade edge, which we will use intermittently throughout. This will not sharpen your knife per se, but will realign the edge, ensuring that it keeps cutting cleanly without tearing or needing excess force. Let's demo how to use it now. My knife, like many German-style knives, is sharpened to a 22-degree angle, so we will start with the steel pointing straight up and putting our blade at a 90-degree angle against it. Half of that is 45, and half of that is 22.5. Which is right around what we are looking for. Now we are just going to run our blade down and away on both sides, applying equal force so that both sides of the blade are sharpened at the same angle. Steels come with a thumb guard, so it is very hard to cut yourself, but if you are afraid that you will, put the tip of the steel straight down on the board and follow the same steps as before. You can test that your blade is aligned by holding a piece of paper with one hand and slicing down with the other. If the cut is jagged or your knife will not cut through at all, keep honing your knife. Next, let's review how to hold your knife. Make a finger gun and place your pointer finger on the bottom back corner of the blade and your thumb on the opposite side. Then wrap your remaining fingers around the handle. Knives are balanced at the back end of the blade, just behind the bolster. If you were to hold your knife with all 5 fingers on the handle, it'll become heavier and it will be harder to maintain control and precision. With your other hand, you want to make a claw with your pointer and index finger tucked behind the middle finger and your pinky and thumb behind that. Make sure your fingers that are holding what you are cutting are as straight up and down as possible, and keep your knife against a flat side of the claw as much as possible. The more splayed out your fingers are, the more likely you are to cut yourself, and cut yourself severely. Okay, with all of that out of the way, let's get cutting. First, we have bell peppers. These won't be in our pico, but people often ask me what the best way to cut one is. The first way, which is my overall favorite, is by trimming the stem off and placing it flatly stem side down on the board. We want to cut in between the grooves on the pepper because the grooves are where the bitter ribs of the pepper are. Then we start with our knife angled out before cutting down and back inwards, slicing back and forth as we go. This will leave you with just the meat, and you'll be able to discard the seeds, ribs, and stem all in one piece. The next method, which is slightly easier but less efficient, we will start by cutting the top and bottom of the pepper off, then slice in between the ribs of the pepper and run our blade along the interior of the pepper, removing the core all in one. We then can cut the strip of the center meat into more manageable pieces. We will then separately cut the bottom and top of the pepper. Finally, the easiest but least efficient and messiest way is cutting the pepper directly in half and scooping out the ribs, core, and seeds by hand. If you have little to no knife skills, this may seem the easiest, but will quickly become obsolete once you become more competent handling your knife. I like to think of anything I cut in terms of taking it from boards to planks to dice. So we start with our pepper board, skin side down, and angle our knife down and away before carefully shimmying it back and forth to take out any remaining membrane. We want to turn our board into planks, so we flip it skin side up, place our knife tip above the top of our pepper before pushing down and away, lifting our blade up and resetting before pushing down and away again. This is called a rocking cut and is one of the main advantages of a French style blade. It may seem tempting to cut on the backswing as well, but you will quickly lose rhythm and start to cut very inefficiently and sloppily, so only cut pushing forward. We are next turning our planks into dice. I'm taking a manageable amount of planks, and with the rocking cut, I'm going to cut them into small cubes. If I wanted a more precise cut, I'd cut less at a time, but with precision, you lose speed and vice versa. And for this application, I am not concerned with precision. Okay, now back to our pico. We are going to cut the jalapeno the same way we would our bell pepper, but because of its size, I'm going to use a paring knife to cut our boards. Then we are going to take out the membrane before turning our boards into planks and our planks into dice. Next, we have our tomatoes. These are Roma or plum tomatoes, which are my favorite to use for pico because of their shape, firmness, flavor, and affordability. First, we are going to use our paring knife to carefully take the eye out before we quarter our tomatoes, and then take the seeds out, much the same way we did our pepper membrane. Next, take our boards or petals into planks, and then planks into dice. Next, our shallot, which I prefer to red onions because they are sweeter and more deep in flavor. You can peel them whole with a paring knife in a similar fashion to how you may trim green beans, but I personally prefer to take the stem off and cut them in half and pull the skin off then. We are next going to mince these. We want to trim any roots sprouting from the back end of our shallot, but we don't want to take the root end completely off. We start by cutting down our shallot, following the horizontal grooves, cutting as close to the root as possible without cutting through it. Then we carefully make a couple horizontal cuts from stem to root, being careful not to cut through the back. Then we simply use our rocking cut to detach the shallot pieces from the grid we have just created. The more cuts you initially make, the finer the final product. Next, our cilantro. Using a sharp knife, trim off some leaves. If some stems make their way in, don't worry. Next, roll the cilantro into a tight bundle and using the rocking cut, chop it before cutting it a little bit more finely. Don't chop it too much or it will bruise and discolor. There should be little to no green staining the board. Finally, we are going to zest some limes using a microplane. You can also use a peeler and very finely mince the zest if you don't have a microplane, but they are affordable and useful, so I would recommend the investment. We are zesting with the microplane facing down and the lime underneath so we can see the color of the lime underneath. We only want the green outer layer. The white pith underneath is extremely bitter. Okay, we have 5 tomatoes, a large shallot, a large jalapeno, a heavy quarter cup of cilantro. We are going to add in a heavy tablespoon of zest and the juice of 2.5 limes, pepper, and a little olive oil for texture. Wait until the last minute to add any salt, as it'll draw moisture out of your tomatoes and make your pico watery if you add it too early. This is the ratio I used, but there is no set recipe for pico de gallos. Use whatever ratios fit your taste. I hope you had fun watching and learned a little something, and I can't wait to see you all next time.